screen.
All right. So tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ingarangi ko England me Ireland, te whakapaparanga mai engari, ko Kirikiri roa te whenua tupu, ko Pōne ke te kāinga, ko Dianne taku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. And kia ora to everyone online. See some of you there. Hello. Alrighty. So thanks so much for coming along. And thanks so much to Maya for organising such a really awesome meetup. And yeah, it's so heartening to be with people in a room where we're all here because we care about enabling people to access information, whether or not, whether or not they need to use assistive technology. So I think it's like a really noble task that we're all kind of trying to achieve. So I just want to celebrate that and thank you all for coming along. I know that you all bring a lot of experience and expertise into the room with you from your background. So super keen to hear from you if you have anything to share. I'm certainly no expert, but my goal today is to just tell some stories about some of my schemes, the things that I got up to in my role as a software developer for Optimal Workshop. And the idea is really how can we make accessibility kind of just part of the way that we work? How do we make it easy, essentially? Because as you're probably aware, we can face a lot of challenges when we try to make it happen in our products. Okay, clicker. Does it work? Is it on? Yes, it is. Is it on?
It was. Oh, hang on. I clicked on that. Let's see if it goes back.
Oh, yep, it's working now. Cool. Thank you.
It's easy to be woman.
Hello, Megan. Cool. So, just to kind of set the context for the work that we're doing at Optimal. So on the one hand, I think we all know that our ideal scenario for accessibility is that we're building a brand new app. We want it to be accessible. We start from the left with design. We design it to be fully accessible. We build it. Boom, it's done. Great, amazing. Wouldn't it be so great if that happened all the time? Unfortunately, the context that I've been working in is, so we are a 16-year-old monolith that was not developed or designed with accessibility in mind pretty much at all from the start. And a bit of background as well, we're a SaaS company selling digital research tools to a range of global customers. And our customers are predominantly UX researchers, designers, or other people who do usability testing and research. So we've got kind of a niche customer kind of base. It's not like we're building something for the general public. So there's a real kind of just kind of a slice of the population that we're designing for, essentially. Other bits of context are that at the end of last year we got a new CEO. I delivered this talk just before that. So this is based on a lot of the work that we were doing last year. And yeah, things have changed. The economy's changed, company business strategy has changed, but the things I'll talk about are hopefully at least useful to get you to think about how you might enable your teams to deliver on accessibility goals. So and so at the point we had accessibility as a kind of a goal on the roadmap, like we want to achieve, WCAG 2.1 AA. And then kind of product shifted that goal and said, actually, accessibility is just the way we do things now. And I thought to myself, that's so interesting. I wonder how we can make it a part of the way that we do things. So I did some digging and did a little bit of research into the kind of the history of the company and what they'd been up to, and regarding accessibility for the past however long. So we've had various things in the past, an accessibility club. We went from a state of being proactive to reactive in the sense of, we'll just had this big accessibility backlog of to-do list, but we kind of axed that in favor of like, well, we'll do what customers ask us to do. In 2021, we got a key sort of customer say, hey, like, you know, we're keen to use your products, but we have this kind of accessibility requirement. And by 2022, we'd kind of had a slice of our product, you know, tick accessibility kind of done. But yeah, it's interesting to see the kind of waves of enthusiasm, you know, people come, people go, and yeah. So the other thing just to point out about our context is that, you know, we're trying to retrofit accessibility onto an existing code base, which is what poses, you know, most of the challenges here. Cool. So where are we now? So we've got one segment of the app is accessible. Hooray! We had a whole team. We got some advisors in. We did some testing. We did an audit. Boom, you know, this little section is done. But it took a fair bit of time and focus. We have introduced automated testing into our app. And so that's a big piece of the puzzle that I'll be talking a little bit more about later. But that's a really big plus. And if you can get automated testing into your code, that's going to take you a long way. We still have large gaps in accessibility across our product, and it can be quite difficult for us to identify exactly where those are. Oh yeah, that's what I was saying before. So yeah, now it's part of the way we do things, or at least it was, rather than being a product goal that we're explicitly working towards. And yeah, that's spoiler alert. So things changed. But so designers in the room, I'm sure you'll love my beautiful graphic here. So this kind of on this side here, this is kind of the way I kind of see our approaches toward accessibility in the past. Kind of someone doing something here, someone's doing this thing over here, there's a project here, there's a club. So all these things kind of happening, but you know, are we embedding it? Is it a part of the way we work? Is it all cohesive? And so I'm going to talk about like an 8-step kind of recipe, or 8 kind of things that should hopefully get a little bit more alignment so that everyone is kind of working towards the same goal and working in a way where via the path of least resistance is this idea that I'm kind of coining. So in order to figure out what is the path of least resistance, I was like, well, what is this resistance? You know, where is all this resistance coming from? What's actually stopping us from being able to do this? So you could kind of see that, you know, taking this kind of squad by squad approach, deploying kind of one isolated team onto accessibility was great for that part of the product. But unfortunately, you know, a few people got really awesome and skilled at accessibility, but that didn't propagate, you know, around to the rest of the team. So you got a few experts and then everyone else is like, Development first, accessibility second. So one project that we had was, a job was to upgrade the tech and also make it accessible. And the way that we kind of planned out and scoped the product was, well, we'll do the upgrade first and then we'll go and do accessibility. And I'm sure you can imagine what happened. Suddenly there was something much more important that we had to do. So yeah, the accessibility piece didn't happen. We have 1 or 2 really passionate people in the team. Ariel Rees is an amazing developer who's really passionate about accessibility, and he got the testing suite in. And but you know, it's not a silver bullet, right? Having one person being that champion, that's not going to mean that everyone else is going to also champion it. And it can be quite easy to go, well, he's the accessibility guy. We've got accessibility covered, right? And that's just not the case. And if online courses really good, you know, we all got licenses to go and do some course. And the reality is that, you know, I think software developers have a lot of stuff that they have to learn. And it can be quite difficult to prioritize accessibility. And goodwill, like saying we're going to do it, saying we care about it, that we're all about it, unfortunately doesn't necessarily translate into building accessible products. So yeah, we're always running out of time. We never have enough time. do things. WCAG, if anyone's ever just had a quick look at WCAG, you would have just gone and run away screaming probably, because it's huge. It's a huge tome, and that can be a huge hurdle. Shifting priorities, a lack of expertise, like while we're passionate about it, we're not experts, we're not auditors. And then often, when we propose these kind of quite significant changes to an existing application, it comes with a lot of technical risk. And for example, if we make a change to one component that's used all throughout the app, it's like, well, particularly when it comes to styling changes, that can be quite risky, because our ability to do like visual regression testing in an app that has quite a huge different number of states depending on all sorts of things, it's kind of impossible to really be super confident that we haven't broken anything. So there's just that kind of like, I don't really want to risk it kind of resistance there. So just let you look at this beautiful waterfall for a sec while I have a sip. So you can imagine all of these boulders are all of the things that are getting in our way, not enough time, shifting priorities, WCAG, and we're going to be this cool water just like cruising on by, getting accessibility, getting some traction. So one thing that I identified that was essential was that it has to come from the top. So if there's no buy-in from management, then you're just going to be fighting a losing battle. So, which means that if you have that ability, if you're in that position, take that opportunity to really articulate the why to your leadership from a business strategy perspective. So in my view, people who are running a company not really keen to do things because it's the right thing to do, but they might be keen to do things if you can convince them that it would bring some value to their business. So just to arm us, and I'm sure you've got these already, but just to kind of point out, these are some kind of little sound bites to arm yourself with, to kind of be like, this is why it actually can bring you value. So obvious things, this is sort of because it's the right thing to do kind of thing there. We don't design train systems or stores that are not accessible. Why is the internet that way? That kind of appeals to your kind of conscience. Some facts: 1 in 5 Australians have a disability that will be alleviated by WCAG guidelines. I just happen to have that fact. I'm not sure, there's no reason why it's about Australia. But so 1 in 5, so that's, a fifth of your market would benefit from accessibility improvements. Another thing that might be more motivating is the mandates coming for government and the private sector, so particularly banking and financial services. So for us, we have, customers or vendors who are making a decision about which product they're going to procure for their organization. And part of what they have to find out as part of that decision making is, does it meet WCAG or does it meet whatever kind of mandate? And so that's kind of happening more and more. As is kind of shown just by here, a few kind of quotes that I've pulled out just from a bit of research on Slack. Customers are wondering about accessibility. They've done some screen reader testing. They're keen to help out. Responsible for accessibility, it's important that we use tools that meet the standards. So we get quite a few of these. So, I think these are really useful in that argument of why it's valuable to kind of make the argument that we can beat our competitors in these situations. So getting leadership buy-in, super important. Oh, how's everyone doing? All right. Leveraging automation, so outsourcing the bulk of the work. So again, doing as little as possible. So one of the key, you might have heard of it, is X Core. It's an API developed by DayQ Labs. And so that's the kind of the core API for establishing automated testing in your app. So you can kind of wrap your components in an assertion that says, is this accessible? And so whatever your stack might be, you'll probably be able to find a tool that's based on this core API that will help you to do that. As you can see, they're saying on average it can find 57% of WCAG issues automatically. So that's a pretty good chunk. And having a test tool is good, but having a testing strategy is even better. So we did do a little bit of mapping out. Actually, I was going to include that, but we have a product map, which is a really high level abstraction of the product, which is literally just like blobs on a page. And so kind of using that as a way to kind of identify areas that do have coverage and those that don't, to prioritize areas. So for us, we have a participant kind of facing side where our users will run a test with some participants. So that's the kind of public facing user base that we have. And so that part of our app is really accessible because that's kind of designed for the public essentially. But we've still got work to do for our actual researchers. Yeah, and so we, what I was saying before about it's difficult to do visual regression testing in an app that has a whole lot of different states. And so getting coverage, so we kind of adopted the strategy of if I'm creating a new component in the app, I'm going to front foot it with an accessibility assertion. And the cool thing about it is that they're really easy to whip up. You just kind of, especially if you have Copilot, like accessibility test, please, boom, it's done. And so if you're front footing each component as you build it out, then you're kind of building that coverage in all those kind of different states as much as possible as you're building new components. And so with that, we decided to measure progress. So one of our developers implemented a monitor that just counts the number of accessibility assertions in the code base. And then so I like to, at our kind of regular meetings, just go, we're just checking in on how many accessibility tests. Oh, wow, we've got this many. It's more than last time. And it was quite funny. One time I checked in and there'd only been one added in the past sort of like quite a long kind of period. But I think it was just a really good kind of reminder of this principle. And I think the monitor is really nice because, yeah, devs love that kind of thing. And then it was really nice the other day. I just happened to notice my colleague was building a new component and then she was putting out accessibility tests in it. And I was like, oh, yeah, she's actually doing it. So yeah, it does take a bit of an accessibility champion, but the monitors help, and having identifying a strategy of front footing each component with an assertion is really helpful.
And Dianne, that monitor, is that part of Xcore or is that something that you built?
No, it's just a separate thing. It's like through Datadog or something like that. Just can be tracked. Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to try and interrupt me. Yeah, and so this kind of relates a little bit to accessibility debt, which I'll talk about in a bit. So number 3, don't reinvent the wheel. So don't try and look at WCAG and then go and try and use it to make your app accessible because that will drive you insane. And you don't have to kind of like comb through all of that information because there's lots of resources out there to help you. So one that I strongly recommend is this one from Duke University, and it's specifically designed for developers, and it has these really just clear things like lists must be marked up using real HTML elements. Like, I can do that, it's kind of WCAG can be a little bit more high level there. And what I love even more is this column over here. So it shows you the level of impact. And then this testing column here was really key to kind of the stuff I was up to, because I was able to identify which elements can be tested automatically, which can be picked up by automated testing, and which ones can't, so those manual ones, which ones need an actual human being to be able to verify that it's accessible. And so you'll see in the next thing there, so that allowed me to focus on the human quotient. So what actually needs our brains and our eyes to actually test. So I kind of put together this manual testing guide for us, and that was made up of things that can only be checked by a human and maybe more importantly, are likely to be relevant to our particular product. So, accessibility guidelines are broad, they're comprehensive, they cover everything, but our product, not everything is relevant to our particular product. So just pulling out those things that might be relevant and focusing on those. And then, so the idea was to use these during our story refinement, our development, our code reviews, to make sure we're catching those things that haven't been covered by that automated testing piece. And top 3 checks, 1, 2, 3, these universal checks are the ones that will always be relevant, no matter what the feature. So we knew that no matter what we were doing, 1, 2, 3 were important things for us to think about. And, if we could at least just think of these 1, 2, 3 things, then we're doing quite a lot. So reading navigation order, zoom, current keyboard focus, always going to be important. And then separating out those context-dependent checks. So we're building this drop-down. Do we need to think about alt text? No, gone. Do we need to think about, et cetera, et cetera. So, just kind of, making it seem less overwhelming, focusing on what's relevant. And you can probably imagine it was fairly tedious to begin with. So we're building this drop down. Why do we have to look through this massive list? But the more we did it, the kind of more intuitive it became. So it became quite quick at going, we don't need to worry about that. It's just either these things. And it just kind of helped us to get some real clarity on what was important and what wasn't, and grow our confidence. This is the debt piece. So I think it's really important to highlight that if you're not building with accessibility in mind, you are creating accessibility debt. And particularly, in the context of government mandates coming through, and if you want to be competitive. We talk about tech debt, and so it's important that we talk the same way about accessibility debt. So we talk about, front-footing with accessibility tests as a way to prevent accruing new accessibility debt. Talk about how much accessibility debt we've accrued to date. It's just a really good way to get buy-in. It's just a really good way to help people understand that it's important to think about. Aim low. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we set kind of just aimed for the bare minimum. So making something fully accessible for kind of all different user types. There are a lot of things that you can do over and above. I feel like, I hope that's okay. Because I'm sure you'd advocate for the full.
I very much advocate for it. Do one thing. Do one thing, because it's already such a thing to just do the one thing.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So there's different levels like AA, AAA. So that was just that. Making things easy, taking the quick wins. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Kind of along that theme of reducing barriers, and that if we change this component, it's going to be risky for all these other things. So I just shared with my team this kind of decision tree about what kind of situations might crop up. and in what cases they are everything's going to be great or everything's going to be easy. So I think this one was, are you creating like a new sort of like top level app? Like, are you about to start development in kind of a whole new like sort of app? You know what I mean? Like you have many different sort of apps within your app. You know, or are you so is it top level or is it, oh my gosh, what does that even say? Oh yeah, so if it's top, yeah, sorry. So if it's top level, put a wrapper at the top level. If it's not, then put it in each component. And then if your tests are passing, great. If they're not, you can and if you can fix it in the app, great. If they're not, you can fix them in the component library. And then ask yourself, does the fix change any of the styling? If it doesn't, great, easy. We can fix that. You know, if it's just a functional thing that's not going to affect the way it looks, easy. And then some other kind of like scenarios for if it is going to affect the styling. So kind of getting some of us in to help with code review and clip testing and run sheets and that kind of thing. But yeah, the kind of just the theme of that slide is the taking the quick wins. Yeah. So in the last two pieces, so we need within team collaboration, so a discussion of requirements of features. So we need to be constantly thinking about how we're sharing knowledge within our teams, so that we don't end up siloed with one person maybe building things accessibly and the other person not. And then to complement that kind of cross-team knowledge distribution. So using all your existing channels, you know, run the accessibility clubs, the forums, and that's a way to kind of, yeah, spread things far and wide as much as you can if you feel like being an advocate. So this is my eightfold path. I'm just appropriating Buddhism here. And Laura, I actually used Photoshop to change the color of this as well. So you'll be proud of me there. And that is the end. Yeah, that's it. So I hope that that has at least kind of you know, inspired you to do something and to kind of see that it's possible to embed things in the way you work. And hopefully it motivates you to do stuff. Yeah, cool. That's me.
You have questions? Questions?
Questions or stories that you want to share about stuff that you've been up to?
Well, I have a first question of just, I guess, how was like the team on this journey, right? Like, so you were an advocate and doing all this stuff and did like a ton of work and research and, you know, flow charts and checklists and all that kind of stuff. How was your team around you, especially if they weren't necessarily just devs, but how did that journey with everybody else go, and how did the buy-in go or not go?
Yeah, totally. So you know, as long as we had that buy-in from leadership, so we were doing a total greenfields project middle of last year. And so leadership were like, cool, this is brand spanking new. We are going to build it accessibly from the beginning. And so we're working in a team with a product owner, designer, and two other devs. And so, yeah, with the help of the product owner and designer and the fact that we were a cross-functional team, meeting regularly, refinements together, I think with a few kind of enthusiastic people, managed to get our particular team on board with that. And I saw the other developers kind of, you know, really taking it seriously and contributing and debating me about how we should do things, which is good. So in that context, I think it worked well. And unfortunately, that project was cut short. But if we had been able to carry on, you know, I do believe that we would have got there. So that face. And then in terms of the wider dev faculty, it was getting there definitely, especially in terms of the automated testing strategy. So the other good thing about the testing strategy is that it also educates developers. So when their tests fail, then they have to figure out how to fix it. So that was kind of my secret goal. And the good thing about that is, so they get educated, they have to figure out how to fix it. Then they might have to consult with a designer about something. And so it's this kind of like bottom-up approach of getting it becoming part of how we think. So that was definitely starting to happen back then. Yeah. And let's imagine that it would have continued to just proliferate.
We have a question in the room. We have a question. I'll ask that first. Question online: what measurements on progress did your C-suite find useful to help their decision making?
Oh, did you help the decision making in terms of whether or not to have accessibility as a goal? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah, that's the one. Yep.
Oh, and in terms of when they changed their mind about that, do you mean?
Well, so earlier you just mentioned that measure the change you're making. So I was really, I mean, it could become a different question. It could become, did you need to provide measurements that were useful for your C-suite? Did they need that from you, or was it something you just chose to do?
Interesting. Yeah. So I think the change that we were measuring was just how much test coverage do we have. So I wouldn't kind of use that as a measurement of like the value that accessibility would bring to a business. But what I would do if I was going to measure that value is I would do some research and figure out how many customers have asked us about accessibility and how many of those customers then went on to not actually buy our product. And so that would be, quite a good indicator of where we might be falling short and where the value might be. Yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have a most commonly overlooked accessibility issue that kind of keeps coming up again and again? Greatest hits. I thought we nailed this. How we keep forgetting about it.
I think probably like navigation order is really hard because we're just continuously changing things and it's just something that gets neglected. So we did, and it's something that, like I said, you can't be tested automatically. And it involves getting developers comfortable with testing with a keyboard at least as part of their kind of general QA. We also have we basically no QA, so our developers are doing QA themselves. What about you? Do you have
Color contrast. It's always color contrast.
Really?
But less so in our products, but in a lot of the internal communications of the business. It's a never-ending battle. White on yellow.
Oh gosh.
Shades of greys. Yeah. Our primary brand color is not accessible with white, and it's used with white all the time. The brand designer and myself are on a mission to tweak it a couple of degrees in the hex chart.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really lucky. We've got an amazing designer who's doing our rebrand, and he's factoring in accessibility from the beginning, which is amazing. Yeah.
Love to see.
What's that?
Love to see it.
Yeah.
And talk after it's finished.
Yeah.
The greatest hits that I have, I'm a developer, so the context I have is usually before our design system came along, the label and input relationship. Every time, even if they have a visible label and they have an input underneath it, they just have no idea how to relate the two together, and it just fails every time in all the lazy pages.
That's something that automated tests are really good at picking up. So yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah, I like to your point about the automated testing. I think that a lot of the time accessibility seems like a really big, huge task. And I guess changing up your testing suite is a big task, I guess, but it just, like you said, it catches almost 60% of things. And yeah, it's the kind of thing where like it can clean up so much. And your example of like teaching other people, like using it as a tool for education as well is also a really good point. And yeah, so that's something that I always advocate for is, so automated system, if you're using like a testing suite and using Axcore, but even just using web browsers to scan the page before like things are committed and stuff, is a really easy way to catch those kinds of things that I mentioned that can easily be picked up anyway. And like it costs, like some of them cost nothing as well, the automated stuff. So like there's like no reason to not do them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that's great about the test as well is that you just have to fix it. Like you can't not fix it. So
Right.
You can't just be like, oh well.
Right.
Oh, I forgot to scan the page. Whoops.
That's a good point, yeah.
Continuing on the theme of automated tests, I've had experience in the past where, with great intention, they put in the automated test suite, they put into the pipeline, and then over the years, as the staff turnover in their teams or areas, they start to just take that as automated test is passed, that's done. We're accessible and ignore the other 40%. That happened, that despite best intentions. How did you manage to, I guess, prevent that scenario or reduce that scenario?
I mean, I think we're basically in that scenario. But yeah, I think that was, differentiating between the manual, just isolating those things that can only be tested manually and then pulling out those top three. Like, yeah, but then again, those top three things are pretty annoying things to check for that you wouldn't do necessarily as part of your kind of daily work, especially if you're just, slipping in a small feature or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, the plan was that we would do this as a team. We would eventually just get so good at it that it would be a part of, how we worked. But yeah, I didn't have enough time really to see how that would work. But yeah, I mean, and I guess there's also an argument for, thinking about when you do that testing in the software development lifecycle. So there's no point in really checking your navigation order at the start or partway through. But yeah, I think we all have good intentions, when a project finishes and we're like, hey, it's done, and then there's all those kind of follow-up things that we mean to do, like
Long tail.
What is it?
The
A long tail, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's tricky.
With manual testing, it sometimes comes down to a bit of an opinion, or or it can lead to a bit of debate of like, what we've got is good enough, and doing it better is going to take a whole lot more work. Did you kind of have that kind of tension and debate going on?
Totally. Yeah, no, that's a really tricky one. And of course, doing our own testing with a keyboard or a screen reader, if it works for us, that doesn't mean that it's going to work for everyone. So, it kind of comes down to that kind of aim low kind of thing, because it's better that you do something than you kind of get hung up on the details and yeah. Hopefully if you're in that situation, you could refer to a handy checklist of things that were relevant, and have a real clear definition of what the requirement was there that you could refer to, rather than kind of, because you can spend ages diving around on the internet. But yeah, is that something that's happening for you at the moment?
Yeah, I think it happens quite a bit. Like, there's, I guess, a matter of opinion. So, and particularly between designers and developers, I'm a designer. So it's sometimes a little bit easier to say, hey, that that solution isn't great, why don't we rearrange these things or whatever needs to be done? And then the developer goes, yeah, but that's going to take us a whole lot more work to get it that way. And it's that, then you start asking, well, is this good enough for the customer? Is this going to, bite us in the long run? Is it worth the effort? And it's really hard to figure out whether, how to justify the value.
Yeah. And that's where I think it's really interesting to think about when accessibility decisions get made and in the process. So I'm sure designers who are advocates for accessibility will make as many of those decisions up front, and hopefully that you can and be it's designed this way, build it this way. Or but you might, I guess you get into those scenarios where something that you didn't predict or there's some kind of other kind of thing. So that might be more tricky, but yeah, as much as possible, designing for accessibility from the left, if you can. But yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, we're kind of in the same boat as you, retrofitting an old system.
Right. Yeah.
So you go, we can do a little tweak here to improve the accessibility, but really fixing it is going to take a lot of work.
Definitely. Yeah. It takes people who actually care, to kind of put the time into it and it takes, I think, if you have that thing from leadership, this is what we do. This is our goal to get to tier 2. Or tier 2, where do they come from? Tier 1 or whatever tier it is. Yeah. But those conversations, it's tricky.
Often we're well, technically we tick the box and it's good enough. But as a accessibility advocate, you're kind of well, I'd like to do a bit more than just make that grade that we can sort of argue that it passes.
Yeah, personally, along the path of least resistance lines, I would go, what goal do we have as a company? Let's make that. Let's not go beyond that.
Yeah.
As much of as a noble kind of goal it is, I think just pragmatically speaking, particularly when you have people who are not kind of super on board with it, it can be good to kind of aim low.
Yeah.
One thing I read, and I'd be interested actually just to hear people's opinion in the room about it, is the idea that as advocates, we're kind of playing a short-term and a long-term game where we have these individual features that we're trying to get across the line and make them as accessible as possible. And we know that, every individual thing that we do really does have an impact on people. So, those small battles count, but we're also having that, big wheel of, big picture stuff and strategy that we're trying to win people over in a bigger sense so that people don't see us as just the accessibility police, but they get excited about accessibility just like we are. So yeah, I don't know, what's your take and then other people's take in the room about balancing that act of the short term, and that is your example, Nadia, is a perfect example of how do you navigate that situation where it's meeting, or maybe it's not even meeting, but it's kind of close to whatever, there's a shortcut, how does one navigate that in kind of the big context of what your goals are, I guess?
Yeah.
I think you almost need to have, at least in your mind, if not officially as a company viewpoint, on what are your priorities? Are we focusing more on keyboard accessibility or screen reader accessibility or visual accessibility, anything like that, and then being able to say, well, it's not our top priority, so it doesn't, so maybe it's okay if we, and you can maybe find a way to compromise, can we at least put it on the backlog? Can we acknowledge that it is an issue? It doesn't just get lost in all of the tech debt, while having that long-term goal of at least raising awareness of it and be okay, so we maybe won't fix this one right now, but at least in the terms of if it's because the developer has built it in a technical way that has made it hard to undo, and at least have that knowledge for next time. Yeah, it's my take.
I think also I just thought if you have a practice of refinement, story refinement, and you're doing some kind of sizing and taking that into account. So having that discussion up front before the work starts and go and ask your developers, how difficult is this going to be? Size it that way, make it visible,
one thing that we're kind of fortunate of having is our customers are starting to pay a lot of attention to this and sometimes doing their own audits and giving us feedback. So I guess if it's something that we skip and kind of go, oh, it's good enough, and if they come back and go, oh, it's not good enough, that's actually going to force our hand. So maybe just opening up those communication lines with customers and making sure they know that they can report these accessibility issues.
Yeah, if you've got like a work stream that they can go into and get action, then that's awesome.
Since it's probably a really strong motivator.
Yeah.
Customer complaints.
Yes.
But yes, not everyone has customers who are that, I guess, engaged with the accessibility part of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The tip is that once you've opened that gate of customer can log accessibility issue correctly, the fun thing to actually also do is to measure how long it takes for your analyst to, or your expert to work out a workaround, or how long it takes to remediate that. Even just so because there's two phases, right? First, make sure the customer can go through. So chances are it's like, if it's gonna take 3 weeks to develop this thing, how do we get them to at least be able to use this part if possible? And so sometimes it takes, like, sometimes it only takes, oh, it's a 15-minute span to just point customer, like, here's a workaround, go and do this to achieve this instead. And sometimes it's like 3 days of someone's time to actually go and work out how do customers succeed through this process. Because again, in an enterprise level kind of scenario, that feature might take ages to fix or could never be fixed. But having the stats of like how long it took to, what's the official term for that? Get customer to at least like finish the task. That's also like a useful metric to like highlight. It's like, well, if we did not fix this in the next 5 days, look at how long it takes someone with a salary review 3 days to resolve that issue, times it by however many other times customers are encountering the same issue.
That's a really good point for Dave's question.
Yeah, good metric.
Yeah, I've just noted that down. Thank you. I'll just add that, like, so where I work, and where Maddie works, yeah, it's always been a fine like balance, a bit of a dance between, I guess, what we now refer to as our major pillars of quality. So it's like accessibility, but security is like the number one for so many people. And it's been a long time in the baking, but we've kind of managed to kind of get that decision making at the highest level to go, oh, so we could get in a lot of trouble just like we could with security. And it's like, yep, you could. And so now that conversation's been really helpful. And so we get piles of stuff coming over from some of our customers that we have to action now. Yeah, and it's really helped just kind of leveling that realism that you can in fact get in trouble in some markets. But that took a lot of fighting. It took a lot of work.
Yeah, nice.
I have a different question. One of the things that, one of your eightfold path is cross-team knowledge sharing. Now, so much knowledge, like there's videos, there's talks, there's reams of articles, there's snippets, like what has been the type of content that your team has been more engaged with?
I think it was quite funny. We had it open to anyone from the company, which made it quite tricky, which kind of meant developers didn't really want to come. This is not technical, so who cares? But yeah, I did do this thing where I just taught people how to use the voiceover screen reader, we just use Macs. And because it's pretty overwhelming, right? If you have no idea, you've never used them before, and you go and it starts yelling at you, and there's all these like secret keys that you're supposed to know how to use, and it's just, yeah, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, it was put together, and it was quite funny because it was remote. And so I had to go make it so simple again, like this is how you turn it on and off with a key. Now go try that. Everyone mute, go try that. Okay, come back. Okay. This is, and real those concepts of basic kind of concepts like, what it means to tab through a page, like what it's actually going to take you through, how you can get it to read out text, because that can be, yeah. So I think that was really valuable because I think a lot of our sales and marketing wanted to test it out because they were having those chats with the customers. And that was, useful for developers, I think, as well. But I've done other things, like I've done quizzes. Sometimes we'll just like dive into the app and do a scan and have a look and go, oh, yeah, it's not great. What does that mean? Also, like if we have overcome, like we've made an accessibility fix for something that was initially kind of difficult, the solution wasn't obvious, sharing that, kind of how we kind of overcame those hurdles. Not sure exactly what was the most successful, but I think probably that screen reader thing. But keen to hear about. Wow, I had the pleasure of attending Maya's accessibility forum at Catalyst. Was so good. I think I just learned like most of what I know from that. Like it was so good. Yeah.
That's good.
So yeah. It's quite tricky, because I think I feel like accessibility is the kind of thing that seems like really easy or something. Or like I think some people are like, oh yeah, accessibility. But the more you look into it, the more actually it can be quite difficult to really understand conceptually what is actually happening. So it can be quite difficult for people it's like you don't know what you don't know. So it's difficult for people to understand what they don't know about accessibility and appreciate that there's a lot that they actually need to learn. So it's kind of, feeding it through in bite-sized little palatable little nuggets. It's kind of my approach.
Yeah, and that's what the approach that she's referring to, like forums, when I was the accessibility specialist at the company that we worked for. So I was doing fortnightly forums, and it ties into kind of what you're talking about, but like path of least resistance of just like nuggets, small things, and like learning tidbits of things rather than like all of WCAG all at the same time.
Sit down and read it, start to finish.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard. So yeah.
I love the exercise you did with us, and you gave us a page, and then you were like, what level should these headings be? And then people shared, and then we talked about our choices and why and stuff like that. Well, that was really cool.
What a way to spark and debate on the homepage.
So that's everybody's homework. Go find a page and ask your friends.
Or your enemies.
It's tricky because it can be debatable sometimes. It's not always clear. So it is good to have that like humility along with being a champion,
Yeah, having others around.
Mm.
Anything else? So pizza's supposed to be arriving. So we'll sort that out in a second. But I guess we'll wrap this up and then we'll turn to the meeting as well. So thanks very much, Dianne. Stick around. I thought that was really interesting. I hope you did as well. Had some takeaways that you can apply. I just thought it was really practical and kind of every day of like what we're doing when it comes to accessibility. So hope you found it useful. Thanks everybody for joining us, for coming both in person and online. Aleph Accessibility and 257 sponsored the event, so we thank them as well. We're going to stick around and figure out where the pizza is, and then we'll eat that. Online, you can search yourselves out for pizza. And this is the last one for 2024. Gosh, sigh, tears. So we'll kick back up in the new year. If anybody in the room has ideas that they want to see, if you want to talk, you don't have to be a pro and have diagrams and big strategies and stuff. Maybe there's just a small problem that you've been dealing with, and you want to just like share a story about accessibility, whether it was successful or unsuccessful at your workplace, or if you're looking for work and how accessibility is tying into that. All that kind of stuff I think will be really useful for different kinds of people. So we want different topics and all that kind of stuff. So just
lengths. It doesn't have to be this full length talk.
Exactly. Even if you have just like short bits, like whatever, I think it's really valuable for us to just be building community with each other and sharing our stories and seeing that there's other people who are doing the same thing that we're doing, because that's what keeps us motivated. So, yeah, so just reach out to me however you want, or pray or whatever, and we'll go from there. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again to Dianne. And everybody online as well. We'll see you next time.